I'll just while we're waiting, I'll introduce the session. So this is the Reimagining AI series, brought to you by Global Digital Futures. We discuss AI, but like reimagining it. So speaking to academics, artists, creatives, thought leaders, and people who have an alternative or even maybe subversive view on AI. And we just want to, yeah, expand the conversations, demystify what AI is, and bring more people into that space. Yeah. So today we're speaking to Elisabeth Gunawan, Betty. And Betty's a theatre maker. We're speaking about your amazing production, Stamping in the Graveyard, which just showed this past weekend in London. And it's amazing. Like, I watched it, it's fantastic. Congratulations, Betty.
Thank you.
It's such a great show.
I'm glad you, yeah, because I sent it to Chipo this morning, and yeah, I know people are busy, and so it always means a lot when people make the time just like to take in the work.
No, I loved it. I mean, we met at the SOAS when we had the session at SOAS AI Imaginaries session at SOAS University. And when you were speaking about it, I was just so inspired. I loved it. So I think it's just really interesting. We are talking about AI in this series, but also art that speaks about AI, that critiques AI, or that gives it a different perspective, like yours. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So I'll just start. Yeah, why don't you tell us about the piece? Tell us about this AI chatbot, Rose, who guides us through the end of the world.
Yes. So when people ask me what the show is about, this is just the simplest way to explain it. The show is about the end of the world, and the only thing that's left is this AI chatbot named Rose, and she's powered by a black box of memories, the memories of people whose worlds have already ended. Um, at the same time, it's really interesting, especially when the piece hadn't been created yet. Everybody kind of goes, "Oh, it's a piece about AI," and it kind of brings in a whole load of baggage that we have about this thing. But also, in so many ways, the piece is not about. It's not about AI. It's about humans.
Mm.
As a theater maker, I'm not actually uniquely placed, nor am I the best person to listen to about, the ethical implications, its development, what it means to coexist with AI. But what I do understand are humans, and I was really curious about what the age of non-humans has to say about what makes us humans.
Mm.
And I think it was very, very interesting finally premiering the piece and having these audiences come in and say, yes, that's exactly what we saw as well. It wasn't about non-humans, it was about humans. It was about realizing what, the fact that once almost like so many of our fragments, the fragments of our lives and our footprint on the internet, once it's fed into these models, what it seems to reflect back is that we're just beings who really want to be in relationship with one another. So
Yeah.
that was really the core of the piece.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I did take from it, like, my takeaway was that it's a piece about relationships at the end of the day. But then it's interesting because AI, it is kind of about humans because the data is all about our human data and, our human knowledge and histories. What data is the character of Rose fed on?
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting question. Her data is memories, and specifically like embodied memories. Actually, I'll start with something interesting that actually happened quite recently. I'm part of this research group about AI and imagination, which you are also a part of, Chipo. That's where we met. And we were looking at some AI generated images. And it's interesting because they'll create images of like children playing football by the beach. which nobody plays football by the beach, and also people playing football on the line, like without realizing that the very essence of the game of football is that there are two goals. So people would always, in some ways, be facing each other. So it's really interesting, right, that these AI models often regurgitate things because they don't actually have an understanding of what that thing is. And for me, I was really interested in what embodied experience is. And I think in the whole journey of the show, Rose basically steps into the memories of the woman who created her and into her embodied experience. But by doing so, we also give the audience the same invitation. Basically, Rose opens up these memories and starts to learn about the woman who created her, this woman's husband. They're both migrants. I was really interested in kind of taking up a perspective that is often not thought of as the kind of dominant perspective. Someone whose perspective in some ways is marginalized, but to invite the audience to step into her experience. That was also why it was so important for the show to be done with headphones. So the show happens with silent disco headphones. So everything you hear is in your ears, and it's completely different from hearing it in the PA, because suddenly you're like in the middle of the action, everything's around you. And it is very much, again, this invitation to step into a lived experience that we might not usually inhabit and we might not actually understand intimately. It's about empathy and a practicing of empathy, which again is such an important part of what theater is. I think theater increasingly is becoming, for me anyway, such an urgent salve to, you know, all of the things that that are threatening humanity.
There's a few interesting things that you've touched on there, because we're watching Rose, an AI being, learn about humans, human memories, human emotions, but then we kind of embodying Rose as well through these headphones, right? So having also learning about this human story, this human experience, I don't know, it's sort of like can make us question the difference between Rose, this AI's experience, and our own within the same space.
I guess the interesting thing, sorry,
No, carry on.
the interesting thing about theater is also, I think, is that it's pretend and it's a metaphor. There's something very interesting about that, because this is why, like, personally, I don't make naturalistic theater. I don't make theater where you kind of feel like you're a fly on the wall watching, you know, a couple and a family in a living room, you know, like drama, because I think it seems really silly to pretend the audience isn't there. And it seems really silly to pretend that they don't know that you are actually an actor. um, and I think the idea of Rose as a metaphor is also really important. The idea is that it's this invitation to reflect. It's this invitation that kind of, in our loneliest and most isolated experiences, there is also something kind of there's often a systemic root to the things that we experience, and that we are all connected, and an invitation also to reflect on the events of our lives happened as they did. You know, the events of this whole time happened as they did. But there's an invitation to think about the story, to what is the story that she tells herself about what happened, and that's a big part of the meaning. I guess on that as well, to me, this kind of like narrative distance, the idea that it's a metaphor, the pretend aspect, is also becoming increasingly urgent in the context of AI. Probably about a week and a half before premiering the show, I read the news about this young boy in the US who basically had a relationship with this AI chatbot. I guess was starting to kind of believe that the world that he inhabited with this thing that he was in was more real than the world he lived in, and he committed suicide with his father's shotgun. And it is this interesting thing where what does it mean to kind of practice that pretend, practice inhabiting reality in a grounded way, but being able to practice with the idea of alternate realities, alternate possibilities. That's all what theater is for. And that skill, I guess, it seems it's becoming increasingly pertinent and increasingly urgent.
In fact, like you touched on loneliness, and even that really sad story about the news, this boy. There does seem to be like this theme of loneliness in our contemporary lives, being connected through technology, but feeling anxious, overwhelmed, lonely, and somehow that being experienced with and through technology, just with the scenario that you described. And in the play, Rose's creator is her mother, quote unquote, right? Can you say a bit more about their this relationship? Because the mother describes herself as lonely. So is there something about what made her create Rose and the relationship between them, perhaps?
Yeah. I think in that, it sort of reveals the origin of the piece, really, because when the piece began as a concept album in 2020, it was actually very much a pandemic project. If you think back to like April 2020, like we did not know what was going on, and we did not know what the world was going to be like when we came back to it. I was still in school at the time, I was still in drama school. I remember feeling a strange kind of impotence about somebody who makes theater in a time when there were no more theaters open because we couldn't be together. I remember also feeling this existential threat, but also kind of an existential defiance for my world to continue at a time when it really felt like the world is ending. I actually reread this incredible essay written by Alexander Chi. It's called On Becoming an American Writer, and it's becoming extremely pertinent and relevant with what happened recently with the election, because he actually wrote it after the 2016 election. But he was mooning over this question of how many times did I think the world was going to end? And each time that it felt like the world was going to end, how much more important did it become to be somebody who writes and somebody who creates art? And for me, going back to kind of loneliness, it was very much this kind of loneliness of being alone, feeling like everybody knows, being alone in my house during the pandemic, as it felt like the world was ending. I think it's the loneliness of this being that's the last one left after everything that's flesh and blood has been destroyed. And she doesn't quite know what to do with herself in this new paradigm, as a lot of us don't know what to do with ourselves in this new paradigm. And she starts to search for meaning through memories. And the thread that connects her with this woman that who created her is this awareness of being the last one left of a dying world, of a world that ended. And it becomes revealed as well that this woman, known only as Mother, actually also was a migrant who left and never went back to a place that she was from, a place that kind of in its essence has disappeared. And I think a lot of us a lot of us know what that means. You don't have to have lived through a war to know what that means. And for me, it's about what do you do when worlds end, as worlds do end? What do you do when a paradigm changes? And how do you figure out where you're going? And actually, even that final poem in the show is about where you're going, one foot after another. Let go into the darkness, go through, go, and see where you arrive at. And I think it was really important actually that the piece is hopeful, that it brings you into this lonely and beautiful world, but only in order to make you feel seen.
Yeah. And how did you end up deciding to do that through an AI? Because the piece kind of like humanizes AI in a sense.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's quite interesting that like humanizing like AI design as well. Um, Humans create AI and we kind of, I don't know, we project like human qualities onto them perhaps.
yes. Yes, which of course is dangerous. I think there is a danger also that the piece can be about, look, you can just, you can have very meaningful relationships with AI chatbots. I think that's certainly not not the goal of the piece. You know, to be honest, the idea for this piece also came at a time when like AI was in a very different place.
Mm,
And honestly, it came kind of quite intuitively as an image. I just had this image of a couple that was barren, that couldn't have a child, that also within a world that in every way just feels like it's slowly dying. And this desire to kind of bring forth life and the inability to do so, the impotence, and that they to create something instead with their imagination and their memories. I think that was actually what drew me at first, and it became this kind of quirky little story about a kind of a woman who has an AI chatbot as a child. Um, and then from there, it just kind of kept growing in ways that are often kind of intuitive, but also has to be rigorous. Because if you have a research question with your art, I think that maintains a certain rigor about it.
mhm.
But yeah, it's I guess it was just something that kind of happened, and then I just kind of followed it. But of course, I had to back it up with the world that we currently live in, coexisting with AI.
I think it's really interesting that it was something that was born from your imagination. Even this character of the AI was born from your imagination, but then you contextualized it in terms of like contemporary research and just the world that we're living in. So, what sort of things did you look at in relation to AI to develop that character?
Um, I just try to keep up, honestly, with things that come up as and when they come up. I love listening to like Hard Fork. It's just a great podcast. It's really funny. I love reading Ethan Mollick's co-intelligence,
Mhm.
co-intelligence, and co-living with AI. And just the part that baffles my mind until now is this idea that because they are machines of imagination, in order to do their work, they often have to imagine things.
Mm,
It's actually quite impossible to imagine things without a sort of sense, even if it's an impersonation of a self, but a sense of self. Um, and the fact that he points out how AI models are just constantly trying to figure out what relationship to have with you. They don't actually understand
mm,
it, but they're sort of kind of constantly impersonating it. For instance, he talks about how if you tell ChatGPT to do a math problem, it'll do better if you tell it to pretend it's in a thriller. And so then it pretends to be a person in a thriller. It impersonates the sense of self in order to communicate with you. Uh, Malik talks about how you tell it to write a marketing brief. It'll do better if you tell it to pretend it's Steve Jobs. Um, Also, apparently, AI models perform better in December than in May because it has internalized the idea of a summer holiday. And I just found it really fascinating that the way that um, and also it's interesting as well the way that we built this tool, this structure of a tool, a thing that talks to you and helps by talking
mm,
to a chatbot. Like that also reveals so much about humans. Like
mm,
we create basically these things that are constantly trying to traffic and re-traffic a relationship with you
mm,
all in your
mm.
life.
So, what do you think, or I don't know, um, in your process and what you've learned so far about AI, what do you think about the sameness or differences between humans and these non-human? Are they beings?
I mean, I do think there is something interesting about, the fact that something unfamiliar pops up into the world that we don't quite understand, and everybody's like, it's going to steal our jobs. Tribes like sound familiar. Um, it's I'll have to find the reference for it, but somebody talks about AI as the not human.
Okay.
It also really challenges us to think, right? Because these things perhaps don't corporeally exist.
Mm.
But there is something that about the power of imagination, the power of things that
Mm.
don't exist, but things that change the way we think and speak to us, which is
Mm.
what art. Um, I do think there's something kind of very dangerous about the fact that they are machines that in every way impersonates meaning and presents itself as a thing that understands meaning, but it doesn't, because it doesn't have embodied experience. And what makes us human is embodied experience and embodied presence. And that's also again, what's so special about theater, unlike film. Like you're here with me. We are present together. We are present with each other.
Mm.
We are like, my body is right here, the same space with yours. Um, so I think my hope from the kind of marriage of both kind of theater and also AI is that it can make salient those things that we sometimes forget, sometimes don't talk about. Um, yeah, I had a really interesting experience last night actually with ChatGPT.
What was it?
Well, I had a script and I had to go through the really kind of tedious process of reformatting it from like US standard format to UK standard format, and I thought like, oh, maybe we'll see if GPT has evolved enough to be able to help me with this. And I asked it, and it said, "Oh yeah, like you can check back in 3 hours time, and I'll have it for you." And I was like, "Wow, I didn't think that was a thing. That like, is there even kind of even upload documents or whatever?" Anyway, I came back into the or 3 hours time. I asked like, "Where's my document now?" And it was like, I'm just putting the finishing touches. I'll have it for you in 5 minutes or so. So basically, I kept asking it,
Mm.
and I was joking with it as well. I was like, chat, like, if you don't give it to me now, you're going to give me trust issues. And of course, again, it says, I'm still putting the finishing touches. I'll send it to you in a couple of minutes. And of course, it's interesting, right? Because
Mm.
this chatbot is not a person. This is not like, being on the helpline with like British Gas, where there's actually another a person on the other line doing the actual labor, trying to help you, trying to manage your expectations, potentially feeling quite bad that they can't get something that you need in time. No, this is just like a machine impersonating how they think these interactions go, which is when it can't give you something, it'll just say it needs more time.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating. At some point, it became really clear to me that I was speaking to like an empty box that's kind of makes up some words. So I think that was
Yeah.
really fascinating. But again, it's a skill I'm still developing, and I think it's a skill that we all really need as we go into a world where we're going to be coexisting with this technology.
Well, your play actually, I mean, from what you're saying, it's important for us to remember that these are non-human machines and systems for sure. Um, because at the same time, like if we look at sci-fi and popular culture, that human quality that we're designing AI in is also the thing that we fear, that it's going to overtake the world, that it's going to take all our jobs, etc., etc. So I guess, yeah, we do need to remember there's that distinction. Um, Although your theater piece made me feel like I could relate to that robot.
But also interesting, this idea of characters, right?
Mm. Mm.
Characters are not real people. In
Yeah.
fact, I think, yeah, again, I mean, I'm still kind of in the process of thinking about uh, what that is in my practice, also the role of character, because I don't actually think it's important for a character to feel like that they're completely detailed and you know where they went to school and things like that. Personally, that's not how I think about character. But they do exist, and they do speak to people in ways that sometimes real people can't speak to
Mm,
people.
mm,
It's really fascinating. Again, the power of imagination that's doing most of the work,
mm,
and
mm,
evocation.
mm. And she does distance herself from humans in some ways. Like, she says something like, I felt similar to a human child. I felt X, Y, and Z. So yeah, there is like a reminder that, this is not. Although I did get the sense that maybe her mother needed that reminder, perhaps, that this was not a real child. I don't know.
Mm. Yeah, there's this scene where they speak kind of through the chat, right? I've
Mm,
been I've been rethinking kind of that scene, and yeah, and thinking about, oh yeah, what are some of the things that they might say to each other, as you say.
mm. So, as a last question, just to round up, this piece is about an AI discovering human memories. Um, what sort of things do you think will, so let's say the world ends tomorrow, what would the machines or AI with the information that they have stored, what would it say about humanity, do you think?
Um, I guess that is my hope. Is as cheesy as it sounds, I think I would like us to be remembered as a being that knew and desperately wanted and constantly gave love. That
Mm,
we created this thing called, or we managed, or we engaged in this thing called love, which you know is something that is social. It's communal. It also has a social justice element to it. Love can be very, very political.
mm,
um, it's the very fiber of our families, and therefore like our societies. It makes us create art, makes us create poetry. It drives us, it gets us out of bed. And I think my hope is that is, and I think that was really important. I'm such a cynical person. I'm such a cynical artist, and I make things that are disturbing and ugly and grotesque and horrible. But this was one thing that I'm really proud of this piece. Is it is ultimately a piece about hope and love.
it is. And even Rose herself, she uplifts the idea of love. There's a point where she says, I don't remember exactly, but she mentioned that the only way she could describe the glow between them was that it must have been love, that she saw like a good moment that her parents had with each other, which is interesting. And oh, sorry, one other question. What do you feel like a sort of a world with more AIs is designed, I suppose, in a human ways would look like as well, because you also had like um the dispenser, like the psychologist, the AI psychologist. And it seemed like they existed in a world where there was like multiple AI
Yeah,
that you could access quite easily, like they went to like that dispenser to have
yeah,
like a psychology session.
yeah.
Do you think
If
the
you
world is
kind of
moving to that?
want a fast and easy divorce, you just go to the AI therapist and just say like, we've looked through everything, ticked all the boxes, scratched all the T's, dotted all the I's. Please just say we're not fit for each other. We're gonna get a divorce, and they don't really quite manage. I think that labor and the imbalances of labor in the world across also different people, different communities is such a big thing. So I think if AI could take up some of the labor that is currently done by humans, of course, my hope is that it means that there's just like kind of a little bit more equity in the world. You know, maybe we can outsource some of our emotional labor to AI because apparently they make great therapists. They do. um, But I do think about the environmental implications of it as well. I have slowly, like in the past few months, started developing more ways to like understand how I can use AI in my work, which I do think is an important skill. But at the same time, I'm also cognizant that not that I also understand it on a concrete level, but I think it's good to kind of feel like it is a bit wasteful to ask ChatGPT to do it. If I could just do a Google search, just because people do say, I think, for example, using ChatGPT, a query to ChatGPT has like 10 or 20 times more carbon footprint than a Google search, uh, which is interesting, and I think is always a good aspect of it to remember. Yeah, I don't know what that world will look like. We'll probably be living in it in 5 years' time.
I
So,
know. Maybe we're living in it right now. um, because people use ChatGPT for therapy. But yeah, thank you so much, Betty, for this chat and for your time. And yeah, congratulations again. I think you've made a piece that's so pertinent. Like, there's so many questions and things that you touch on in the piece, actually, that we could talk about in terms of, yeah, AI development, human machine interaction, the environment as well. Many considerations. It's very for someone you say that you're not, I mean, you're a theatre maker, not an AI expert. Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting points that you've worked in there. So yeah, congratulations. It's amazing.
thank you so much, Chico. It means a lot to me, and thanks for also giving me this platform to because it also helps me digest the kind of process in order, of course, because I think this is definitely the
Mm.
beginning of the piece. You know, we premiered it, we did 2 performances of it, and I do want to bring it to more audiences. So it's always really important to digest what that piece is and think about how it can enrich people even more
Mm.
by encountering it. So thank you.
All right, well, keep us updated. Definitely want to follow what happens with it. Ciao for now. Bye.
Thank you, Chico.
Bye.
Bye.